Clay, we have a Speaker of the House.
Yes.
Which was a thing that we knew was going to happen. Many of you, I'm sure, saw on Friday or over the weekend that Kevin McCarthy is the Speaker of the House. I think we can get into some of the details about this. It happened exactly as you and I discussed, which was that there were concessions made. And so it looks like a win for many of these rebels. I think they like the term rebels, so we can use that one. Some of the rebels against the status quo on this one. McCarthy gets his speaker's gavel, but there are some strings attached to it that would be of benefit hopefully to the country. I did bring up how in other deliberative bodies, I don't know what the legislature is called in Taiwan. I even looked it up and I've forgotten it now again, but it's not like the Taiwanese Senate. There's some other name for it. But there are other times when you've seen people, they've got a little
handsy,
rough with each other, a little handsy with each other on the floor. Yep. There's that. I don't know if it is apocryphal or not. A word I've used twice today, sorry, meaning it could be fake. It's a story that people say. A lot of really cool stories are apocryphal, which is a shame, right? I mean, you hear these things like, oh, I wish that was true. The thing about the two sword lengths in Parliament, I've seen people arguing historically whether that's really the case, that was supposed to be two, because as some have pointed out, swords were different lengths. And that's a whole other conversation. But
well, we know what happened historically. I used to give tours of the United States Capitol. Have I said this on the show before? When I was in college, I would walk people around
the United States. The history nerd hat. He just slips it right on. Yeah. Doesn't miss a beat.
This was pre-9/11. So you could actually walk people out onto the Senate floor. You could walk them out onto the House floor. There may even be somebody out there listening who I took on a tour, because I bet I took hundreds of people on tours of the United States Capitol back in the day. So if you were from the Nashville area and you got a tour in 2000 or 2001, might well have been me. But you used to be able to take people on the old Senate floor and the old House chamber too, Buck. And if you remember, Preston Brooks, and this is all off the top of my head from 20 plus years ago when I would give tours, was in the House from South Carolina, and he beat Charles Sumner in like 1856, I think it was, in a debate over slavery on the floor, almost killed him.
Beat him with a cane, right? Almost beat him to death with a cane.
And when he went back to South Carolina, his constituents gave him a brand new cane because his cane broke in the beating, and on the cane was the message, hit him again. So if you think we're dealing with violent era now, back then, Preston Brooks not only nearly killed a man on the Senate floor, when he went back home, they rewarded him and gave him a new cane.
Well, it's like what I mentioned a few weeks ago on the show, that James Monroe was about to have a duel with Alexander Hamilton, and Aaron Burr was like, no, let's
calm down, buddy.
Let's chill out here. We don't. And then 7 years later, Burr killed Hamilton in a duel. So things used to get rough and tumble. We're making these historical comparisons because I had brought up that given the tensions on the floor of the United States Congress, things could get a little frisky. And sure enough, Mike Rogers, not a guy I'd really thought much about before this, as in I didn't know who he was really. Got a little. He had to get held back. You saw the video of this. He got really upset with Matt Gaetz. We haven't seen anything like that on the floor of Congress in a while. It's kind of funny because a lot of what the response was I saw from a lot of people. Good, get a little fired up, have a little passion out there. I mean, no one actually engaged in violence, but he got a little fired up. I was a coach. You've been a coach. Sometimes you're a coach. The assistant coach got to hold you back a little bit because the ref blows the call.
Also, I would say Matt Gaetz is a big dude and also relatively young. I don't like very many people in the United States Congress's odds against Matt
Clay,
Gaetz.
But you're discounting old man strength, which old man strength can come out of nowhere. I don't know what it is. You've experienced, I'm sure, like, if you ever had like your grandpa grab you when you're younger, you're like, damn, grandpa's got a vice-like grip. That's where I learned the word lamb-based, too, from my grandfather. So
I will say old man strength. I've thought about this quite a bit because, one, it's like, the way that some people used to get strong was by actually doing physical manual labor. So country strong, you've probably heard that phrase before, where you're just like, you're out on a farm and you just carry stuff around all the time. My grandpa was country strong, like wasn't in a gym, like, doing curls and, like all these different strong exercises. But I will say, if you've ever tried to walk around with multiple kids that you are carrying, you get, and mom's the same way, you get to the, you just shrug somebody who weighs 30 or 40 pounds from one hip to the other. Sometimes you're carrying a couple of them. You watch dads try to get to the beach in the summer. I mean, it is like its own competition. You're dragging like 8 different tents and chairs and everything else and a cooler, and you got a couple of kids on your shoulder, and you got a wife who's probably walking along because you forgot the sunscreen, and like you're dealing with all that. That is old man strength.
Grip strength is a very good indicator of actually not only strength, obviously, but long-term health and vitality among men. And I mean, I've been around because of my time in the CIA, a fair number of operators, war fighters, badasses, etc. And one thing I picked up from more than one of them, but one of them in particular told me once, he said, if you see a guy's forearms, that tells you whether you want to fight him or not. I always thought that was so interesting. He's like, because a lot of people that got, they got beer muscles, they don't really know what's going on. But he says, if somebody, if they look like they were a state champion wrestler, when you see their forearms, don't fight that guy.
Yeah, it's a bad idea. I remember my wife said back in the day, another good advice for don't fight guys. She said when she was out in the bar in Michigan sometimes, guys would take mouth guards with them to the bar in case they got in a fight.
Oh, if you see somebody with cauliflower ear, settle it in court. You don't want to fight that person.
If somebody calmly says, do you want to take this outside? Don't go outside with them. They'll kill you. Like that's somebody who's been in a lot of fights over the years. And if you like square up on someone and they put a mouth guard in, you just apologize. So you just apologize right then and there. They've been in a lot of fights.
I saw something. I mean, we have we got a whole Texas family that listens to this, right? The state of Texas. We got so many great people listening to the show every day. I saw something on social media, and I want to check this out, that it is, this is one of these videos that goes viral, that you are allowed to, if you say, I want to take this outside, and you step out there, and even if there's a cop standing there, if it is fisticuffs, and there's no one brings a weapon to the fight, no one uses a weapon in the fight, and they stop when the person is on the ground, that it's not actually an assault. I don't know if that's true or not. It strikes me that you can agree.
That's basically the rules for hockey fighting.
It's kind of the rules for hockey fighting, that under Texas state law. I find that hard to believe, I just want to say, but it is making the rounds on social media, and like if a state is going to have that, it would be Texas.
That is unbelievable. I find it hard to believe that that's the case. But again, if somebody calmly asks you if you want to take this outside, you should not go outside. If they put a mouth guard in, you should definitely apologize.
Yeah,
unless
watch out for
you're
strong
in true
forearm.
danger, you shouldn't be throwing a punch.
Mutual combat. This is apparently a thing. Consent to mutual combat in Texas. It's not crazy. Wow, my mind is
that's
blown.
basically a duel, except without the guns.
We have a Speaker of the House. His name is Kevin McCarthy. But there were some concessions that were made for this. And I think, and I'm curious what any of you think as well, 800-282-2882, that the holdouts on McCarthy got something out of this process. It lasted a few days. In fact, why don't we also have our friend Tommy Lahren joining us, who the White House specifically went anti-Tommy on the Facebook request, right? It was Facebook or Twitter? Facebook,
I think it was Facebook, and they went anti her. They said you shouldn't be able to share this. All she was doing was explaining why she was choosing not to get the COVID shot, which she's obviously been validated on. But that's a straight opinion. You couldn't even share that opinion according to the Biden White House.
Well, this is where we see that the explanation for all this, that it was just misinformation, just the truth, man. We're just protecting truth with our censorship on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Google, YouTube, TikTok, you name it. No, that's a lie. They're lying to you. It was making you comply. It was Orwellian 1984 style. You have to agree with us or else. Agree with us on your own decision-making, on anyone else's decision-making. So I think that's noteworthy. But this was kind of funny, Clay, because, we have the speaker battle is done. And I've got to say, I think you and I, in retrospect, handled this thing very well, which was, all right, let them fight it out. It's a couple of days. Figure it out. Negotiate. Get what you can get. It puts McCarthy on notice that the Freedom Caucus has expectations here. They got some things, which I'll get into in a second, but it's kind of funny because the media's favorite narrative of this, which in retrospect now just shows what a lack of context they have for, or actually just how dishonest they are, was, oh my gosh, it was horrifying that members of Congress were negotiating and talking and disagreeing and arguing.
For 4 days.
This is like saying it's horrifying that the farmers are tilling the soil and planting the crops. Like, this is what they do. Here's Leslie Stahl over at CBS. Play 14.
The historic chaos in the House of Representatives this past week embarrassed not only a party, but an entire nation. A small minority blocked the House from electing a leader or even swearing in its own members. Vote after vote, a would-be speaker could not bring himself to stand aside in favor of a colleague.
I mean, I just want to know how many people will be weeping in the decades to come when they think back to the 4 days that members of Congress were publicly negotiating over who would be the speaker for the next 2 years. Like, just think about how crazy the lib narrative is around this, Clay.
Two things, Buck. One, they told all of us that elections taking a month to be counted, your votes being counted, is just how democracy works, and you shouldn't complain about it. Point one. Point two, the Leslie Stahl, I think that's who we just played, the Leslie Stahls of the world have spent years arguing that the Republicans need to fight to figure out what the party stands for internally and not just rubber stamp everything that Donald Trump demands. Well, isn't that exactly what we just saw? So when it actually happens, it's a stain on the nation, but you've actually been arguing that it has to happen for 7 years. So I think this is important for everybody out there listening to know. Buck and I can tell you, based on our experience, lots of people in media are very dumb. And you may not agree with what Buck and I say on a day-to-day basis, but if we had, let's say, a spelling bee or a reading comprehension test, and every member of the media had to take it, Buck and I would score really high in the media.
I think we would smoke. I would say this comfortably. You and I, as a duo in like a general knowledge, like Trivial Pursuit contest, smoke any two members of the mainstream lib media.
That is a great. Anybody who has a daily show, I would put you and I as a tandem up against any duo that they could put together that appears daily on radio or TV in the country. I think we would.
We definitely beat everybody. Leslie Stahl and whoever else at CBS they put with her. I can tell you that much.
Well, there's a lot of people that if you put them out there, you would never listen to anything they say again because you'd be without their staff. Remember, a lot of these people are operating. That's why I make fun of The View so much, because they probably have 50 producers behind the scenes on The View trying to keep those people from looking like an idiot. And they still manage to look like it. They give them all the research. They give them all the data. They give them anything they could possibly need to talk for 2 minutes and not look like imbeciles. And they still manage almost every day to look like imbeciles.
So the media narrative around this, again, because they are imbeciles, was now in retrospect even more absurd, which was like, oh my gosh, look what was happening. Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. It's done. McCarthy's the speaker. Some of the concessions, I wanted to mention this. Some of the concessions, or I should say the agreements, they're going to hold the vote on all 12 spending bills. They're going to pledge that the top line budget figure for domestic discretionary spending in 2024 won't exceed what it was in 2022. The vacate the chair, which is effectively our version of the British parliamentary no confidence vote. I believe that also was agreed to, went into place. There are some members of the Freedom Caucus on the Rules Committee now, and there'll be some changes that come as a result of that. So this kind of seems like what we would expect to happen, especially after a disappointing midterm and after people feel like there needed to be a little bit of a shakeup. It's not game changer stuff, folks. No one's saying it is, but they're trying to get some things off on the right foot here. Marjorie Taylor Greene, no leftist shill. I think we could all agree on that, right? Marjorie Taylor Greene, a certainly solid MAGA right of center Republican. She's out there saying, look, you got to have some faith now in Kevin McCarthy. This is her words. Play 15.
I came into Congress and, Kevin and I, we had some public confrontations, or not necessarily confrontations, but said things about one another. But I did something that I wish more members of Congress would do. I started talking to Kevin McCarthy, and I went and met with him and got to know him better and got to understand where he sees the conference going, what he sees our agenda and what we should do. And that's why I came around a lot sooner than 20 of my Freedom Caucus colleagues. But listen, here's the great news. I'm glad they came around this past week. So what you saw them do, learn to trust them and have faith in the plan going forward, I was able to do that over the past year. But I hope more of my colleagues do that.
I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene saying, all right, let's give the guy a shot. He got a little bit of a shakeup. He got a little bit of a, we got eyes on you. And I think we need more in the sometimes you need to rattle the cage a little bit.
There was that photo which went viral of Marjorie Taylor Greene passing her cell phone with Donald Trump on that she had saved in her phone as DT. Let me just say this. Power move, I think, by Marjorie Taylor Greene to save Donald Trump's phone number as DT in her phone. Do you see that picture where she was handing her phone, I think, to Rosendale? Like, hey, Donald Trump wants to talk to you during this battle.
He saved in my phone as great hair.
And then the other part of this that I think is going to be huge, Jim, we need to get Jim Jordan on to talk about this, Buck. But Jim Jordan's going to get to they're going to create a new committee and give it the same kind of resources as the January 6th investigation got. And they are going to conduct a full-throated investigation into the FBI, big government collusion, big tech, the rig job in 2020. And again, we got to keep echoing, we only have the House. So the Senate and the presidency are still in control of Democrats. But to me, the best thing that these guys can do in the House is create a record, like we saw today in the Wall Street Journal. We opened up this show talking about, we're going to talk to Tommy about this in a moment, the White House COVID censorship machine is the headline in the Wall Street Journal. Create a record of all of this unconstitutional behavior by the Biden administration and provide it to what I hope is going to be a new attorney general in 24.
Right. And now, while I try to be very, very fair-minded about the real ability of these investigations that Congress can have to move the needle one way or the other. And I would say that while Benghazi, for example, I think ended up being, as an oversight exercise, disappointing, and I knew it would be based upon the factors involved. Getting accountability out of the State Department is like telling, the DMV that they have to move at warp speed. Good luck with that one. Like, it's never going to happen. That all said, though, you and I, Clay, I think would both agree, and I have said on the show, if the New York Post story about Hunter Biden, if that isn't suppressed, if that information gets out there, maybe we have a different result in 2020 in that election, right? We certainly can make that case, and I think it's a strong case to be made. Given that reality, looking at the vaccines, looking at the collusion with big tech and suppression, looking at the FBI and the weaponization of the intelligence community, and getting that information out there could play a pivotal and perhaps even a deciding role in 2024. So I don't want to discount that. It's just you got to get the goods, right? And part of the exercise is putting the bureaucracy, in the case of, say, the FBI, on notice. They don't like their shortcomings and malfeasance to be put on public display, so that's always a helpful thing. But you could get something that comes out here that really shows people you cannot trust this Biden regime with the federal apparatus. You certainly couldn't trust them with public health.
And, Buck, what these emails are showing, and I think this is why there's so many of these emails, The Biden administration was convinced it was on the right side of history. And I think this clown, what's his name? Rob Flaherty, the White House director of digital media. I think he was writing these emails thinking, literally as he was typing them out, I'm going to be the star of American history for all of the censorship that I'm doing. And I just want everybody out there to think about this. Because as we pointed out, and I think there's plenty of evidence now on this show, we're both history nerds. How often does someone who is trying to constrict, that is to limit our national discourse, end up on the right side of history? How often does that happen? How often does somebody who says, hey, you know what? I think we need to burn this book. Hey, I don't think that adults should be able to have this conversation. Hey, I think we need to restrict the dissemination of this story. How often do people who are arguing that end up on the right side of history? As long as we have a free republic, the answer is never. Always on the wrong side of history. And that's why this clown, I think they got so drunk on their own power, Buck, that I think what was coming out is going to even blow our minds about just how aggressive they were being in trying to circumscribe our national discourse.
I think a lot of the Fauci zealots thought that they would be shown to have been saving lives and that their enemies, so to speak, in this debate were reckless and murdering grandma. I think a lot of them actually believed that. They are morons, but they believed that. And we're going to see exactly what that was now that we have some ability to get answers thanks to Congress. And I think it's a great start to things. It's not a national disgrace. Yeah, you know what, Clay? People from Japan to Bangladesh to Brazil were just up at night weeping about the prospect of Kevin McCarthy having to wait 4 days to be Speaker of the House. I mean,
it is
national
funny.
Disgrace?
Yeah.
French people weren't watching this saying, oh, the Americans, their country's falling apart. Like, they don't care. The whole thing was ridiculous. But libs, can't trust them.